Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, Sigil here and welcome back to another video. So in this one we're gonna talk about the characters in Justice Mobile in a bit of a different way. I'm gonna talk about the characters that are must-have or not must-have, or in characters that you can have the best performance without owning. Because I feel like a lot of people don't have a good perception of this and be like, oh, you must have all legendary characters, or think that the character is very mandatory to get, and then they get that character and don't get the best results. So this is what this is trying to answer and accomplish. Also, you might have a cat cam for this one. Okay, so first of all, we have the tiers here. Must have early and must have later. What you need to understand about those two tiers is that they're not going to be representative essentially of how strong the characters are, but they're rather going to be representative of how useful the characters are depending on investments. Because, for example, both having a geared up Mr. Freeze that has a decent star rating and having a gearless 3-star Deathstroke are very important. But the gearless 3-star Deathstroke is gonna bring you value a lot earlier than a Mr. Freeze would, because he doesn't need gears, he doesn't need high star rating. And a Mr. Freeze is arguably as important, if not maybe more important than a Deathstroke, but he's gonna require a lot more investment, and for the early parts of the game, that investment is gonna be better spent elsewhere, because for example, with the amount of resources you would need to gear up a Mr. Freeze at 7 stars, let's say, you could get yourself a Deathstroke, a Zatanna, and a Black Adam most likely for that amount of resources at 3 stars, and maybe even a Raven, and those are gonna be far more useful to you without gears and without much investment than a Mr. Freeze would be at full investments. So that's what I'm trying to do with those tiers. But the characters on both of them, characters is in the lower one, doesn't matter, they are stronger, they're weaker than everybody in the first tier. It just matters that you should hold on a bit in terms of investing into them, because it might be a bit of a hassle to get them going. And yeah, the next one is going to be good to have characters that are eventually good to have in your roster. They're really not a priority, but they're eventually gonna be good to be there. Then we have the somewhat useful characters that you sometimes use in some very specific and certain situations. Those are not characters that you should try and actively get. But if you already have them, you might as well put them to good use, and it doesn't matter here is gonna be, it doesn't matter if you have them or not, doesn't really make a difference. Also, this will be a tier list for raids and soul raids specifically. I don't care about Arena and Champions Arena performance. If you're here for that, it's not a tier list for you. And we're gonna go to the new released Blue Beetle. It's gonna fall into somewhat useful. If you want a more detailed analysis of this, you can watch my video on the newly released Blue Beetle. The thing is, he is somewhat of a bit of a better Manta and somewhat of a bit of a worse Mr. Freeze in terms of damage for the free-to-play side of things, at least. And for the pay-to-win side of things, you have a lot of characters that can make use of Beta Club and other stuff, so he's not really needed for that. So I don't really feel like... I mean, this is kind of good to have. Okay, let's give him good to have. But the thing is, you have so many other options. It's gonna be pretty much choosing between him, Manta, and Mr. Freeze, choosing the skin of the character that you like most. The one that is more visually pleasing to you. If that makes any sense. Also, no point in the cat camera anymore because he fell asleep. But let's move on. Atlanta and Moroccoman. Look, I'm gonna put them somewhat useful for Reina performance, because this man is so strong in Arena and Champions Arena, I can't really ignore it. Because of healing, armor pierce, power drain. We got Ace Green Arrow. It's somewhat useful if you ever need to keep a fight from gaining power. He's kind of the best character at that outside of characters using artifacts, because he's got the power stop on the passive and the power drain on the special one. It's pretty good. He used to be used a lot in phase 4. Then we have my boy Arkham Knight Batman. He is good to have, but he's not must have. You can use him for a couple of things. He's very good in Arena and Champions Arena. He can be used for stun setup for the League of Anarchy, and he can be used for Batwoman the Drown to get her more dot damage. But he's not must have in any way, shape, or form. And the supporting of Batwoman the Drown can be taken over by John Stewart Green Lantern, and he actually doesn't really make it in the best team. Because the best thing for Batwoman the Drown is Robin King and him, or John Stewart Green Lantern. And while he makes Robin King a bit tankier, John Stewart Green Lantern helps you out in a lot of fights that have hazards on the ground. because he also messes with that for the enemy. And also, you don't really need Robin King to be tanky, because you're gonna put Puppet on him, the enemy is most likely gonna be blinded, and Batman the Jump also revives him, so it's not really needed. But he's good to have. You have him anyway, you might as well put him to some use. Armor Super doesn't matter. I trust to somewhat useful. The way I used to use the trust and I still use a bit is in Puppet King fights. Because in Puppet King fights, I want to ideally do all my third specials with King before the enemy uses the first super move and gets out the first clone. And the Trustus power stealing is actually helping a lot with keeping the enemy low on power for me to be able to do that. Also, the clone stacking in, getting a bit of power maybe, or maybe a reflective shield is somewhat useful sometimes. Got one of the silver Wonder Womans, doesn't matter. My boy Black Adam. It's good to have. He is a good budget damage dealer. You're gonna be replacing him once you have more teams. He's gonna have no business in your top 6 fights, but until you get to that point, which is kind of later in the game, it's gonna be pretty good. It's gonna be pretty decent, especially with Puppet. Bane is gonna be actually good to have. Gonna give Silver Bane good to have because of the synergy with characters that do damage on their basic hits, because he buffs that. If you have no other options, you can put him as support for King even. You can put him as support for the Just League team if you don't need Aquaman to give you armor pierce in that specific fight. And I usually use him as a support for Manta, so he's definitely good to have. You got the Gold Blue Beetle, doesn't matter. Manta, I'm not sure if I should put him in the must. Nah, let's put him in the good to have. It's not really mandatory. The problem with Manta is that he fills a role, same with Blue Beetle, that a lot of our characters can fill a lot less expensively. Because how you use Manta is gonna be to clean up fights, which you can do with a number of other characters, but he's pretty good at cleaning up fights. And you can also use him with Raven to deal 2 billion damage with Twin Blades, which you can also do with Blue Beetle, you can do with King, you can do with the Batman Ninja team. So that's the thing. You have many options, but I guess I'm gonna put him at must-have later. He's a very strong character, but he needs a lot of investments. Or do we put him at... I don't know, I'm conflicted on this. He's also very good in league raids, so because of league raids, I'm gonna put him at must-have later, but it's really not a priority. Okay, now the Batman Ninja team. The thing is, I'm gonna put the Batman Ninja team at must-have later. Okay, let's put those two guys at must-have early, and Grodd at must-have later. Because Grodd's gonna take a bit more time to farm from the challenges, and Batman, Catwoman, and Robin do have arena seasons. They're going to be able to get them from the arena seasons. I think there's gears for Robin at least in the arena store, and you can use Robin to use Joker as a budget damage dealer until you gear up with Ninja Catwoman, and arguably he's pretty strong, Lord Joker with Robin. So I'm gonna put Joker at good to have. Eventually, I think you want Catwoman. Yeah, eventually I think you want Catwoman to be your damage dealer, depending on the situation. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. I think this is a lot more representative of things, because Robin is the main key of the Batman Ninja team. You have Robin, you can just use Robin to an extent, though he's not very good at that. And then you can swap between using Joker and Batman Ninja Catwoman. Those are good to have. Let's put Catwoman at must-have. The thing is, you can cycle a lot of characters around Robin. He's the only one that you should get early, and you might not have the gears for Batman Ninja Catwoman. The point I'm trying to make is you can use Lord Joker. Also, Grodd is good to have, but don't rush it. Don't rush it. Take your time with Grodd. He's going to be very good once you get him, but not that much of a priority. Big Master Robin doesn't matter. Venom Collapse is, honestly good to have. I'm not even gonna put him in the must-have because he doesn't really have a well-defined role. Because with the Batman the Drown team, he's not very good in that team. You're better off using other characters most of the times. And in terms of a percentage health damage dealer, yeah, he's definitely good at that. But since we got the introduction of the legendary Black Adam, he basically does everything Joker does, but better and a lot faster. I'm gonna put him at good to have, but don't go out of your way trying to get Joker. Not trying to get Venom Collapse, excuse me. But Ninja Batman doesn't matter. Harley somewhat useful, I guess, because she passively buffs the attack of Batmanjic characters just by being your roster. Brainiac is going to be good to have for the pay-to-win side of things. It's going to be must-have later. Let's put him at must-have later, because he's got the challenge anyway. We're going to farm him anyway. It doesn't cost you any gems. Yeah, there's a bit of a problem to the point where some things are slightly different for the pay-to-win side of things, though not as much with all characters tier list type of deal. So I'm just gonna briefly mention them. It's not worth making a separate side of this tier list for that thing alone. Batman Drone must have early. This is most likely other than King, because King is gonna be always accessible from the League store. With Batman Drone, you got to wait for a chest and her challenge to get her gears. But other than King, she's gonna be one of your first damage dealers, hopefully, and she's gonna be insanely good. But Ninja Batman doesn't matter. The Captain Cole doesn't matter. Vixen doesn't matter. Gonna put the Constantine at somewhat useful. You should really not go out of your way to get Constantine. But if you have him anyway, you might as well use him for some cleanup fights, I don't know. And put Collector somewhat useful because he's yet again a very strong character in the Ring 9 Champions Arena, and they just can't ignore how strong he is. Classic Superman is somewhat useful because you're going to be able to use him to reduce the enemy's defense if you're fighting a fortified fight. Classic Wonder Woman is must-have early, I think. I think the earlier you get Classic Wonder Woman, the better it's gonna be, because early in the game, especially when you don't have the top teams built, the absolute peak performance teams, you're gonna scrap a lot of teams together, graft a lot of teams together. For example, I don't have Robin King on my secondary account, and I'm using Classic Wonder Woman to buff Batman the Drowns. Classic Wonder Woman can buff any character in the game, giving them crit damage, and everybody loves crit damage unless they're already using Dark Metal cards, in which case they don't need anymore. So I'm gonna put her at must-have early. Deathstroke must have early. The best legendary character in the game at 0 investment. Because there's no character in the maybe Raven you could argue for, that she's also very good at 0 investment. But you get this man at 3 stars. No gears. And you put him against a 2 billion health fight with a level 1 North Snow Globe, which is a free artifact. And if you play it correctly, you're gonna get 1.4 billion damage. No character can match that at 3 stars, no gears. I mean, I guess you could do some stuff with Beta Club, Raven, Zatanna, but that's stretching it a lot. Darkseid is somewhat useful. Like, if you get him early, don't try to get him. Don't waste your gems trying to get Darkseid because he's useless in raids and so raids, but he's very strong in the arena and Champions Arena, so if you have him anyway somehow, you might as well use him there. Dark Super Gold garbage. Emerald Green Lantern somewhat useful because you're going to use him kind of with the same role as Atrocitus. A lot of the characters that you're gonna see in these tiers, I mean, not a lot of them, but some of them, you're gonna get anyway from Soul Ray drops and League Ray drops, so you might as well have them in your roster by default. We have, I think this is Enraged Bane. Yeah, this is going here. A confusion that people make with Enraged Bane and Silver Bane, because Silver Bane is green, but then gets red when you have level 60 gears, and Enraged Bane is red, but then he gets green when you have level 60 gears, so this is Enraged Bane. And it's also more confusing that they have the non-level 60 gears Silver Bane here, in level 60 gears Enraged Bane. Yeah, in technically Poison Ivy, go for it. Go for it as early as possible. The League of Anarchy is insanely strong. I'm gonna put Harley at must-have later, and Joker at must-have early. Because with the Joker, his gears are gonna more frequently drop from league raids, his shards to drop from league raids, so you're more likely to have him around. And a lot of people are gonna use Joker EPI for a long time until they get the Harley gears. That's usually the cycle of the League of Anarchy. You're gonna find a lot of new players with no gears for Harley, but they have Joker, they have EPI, and their League of Anarchy is ready to go. As soon as you have Harley, Joker kind of becomes useless, but early on it can be very, very useful because it's kind of the best thing you got. Or we can, let's put him at must-have later. Because the thing is, now that we got Zatanna Raven, if you have just EPI without Joker, you can use Zatanna and Raven to buff EPI up, and you're gonna get a lot of damage out of that. So I feel like this is kind of fair because it's kind of the same deal as with Robin. you need Robin, and then you see how you do things from there. You have a lot of options with the Bet Ninja team, a lot of good options, a lot of budget options. Kind of same with the League of Anarchy, a lot of ways to use the team. The only thing that's core to that team is entangling Poison Ivy. Then we got Firestorm, useless. EPI, gold EPIs, Poison Ivy, gold. I mean, the entangling Poison Ivy is also gold, but Flora Poison Ivy is doesn't matter. I mean, she is decent in arena because of the special too. I guess we can put that in somewhat useful. Golden Armor Wonder Woman somewhat useful if you get her from the challenge. I guess you can use her, but she's not worth the investment at all if you're gonna get her from a chest. And yeah, the problem that I have on the other tier list, the Girl of Steel Supergirl gets her head chopped off by the tier list system, but I'm gonna put her in the must-have early. Like, it's absolutely insane the amount of damage she's able to give to Batman the Giant and any League of Anarchy team. That's, as soon as you get her, she's gonna bump up those teams to insane amounts. Grid, doesn't matter. Hawkman, I guess, somewhat useful, and we're gonna see what third member we get in their team, if that member makes the whole team worth it with the legendary Black Adam. Uh, Hellboy is somewhat useful. He heals from hazards instead of taking damage from them, so I guess you can use him for that. When you need the tank. Horrific Scarecrow is somewhat useful. He's gonna increase the power cost for the enemy. Ash, doesn't matter. Just League Aquaman is somewhat useful. You can use him in the Just League team to give you armor pierce when the enemy's got armor, or you can use him to revive with super move when one of your Just League teammates dies. Just like Batman doesn't matter. Cyborg is good to have. And Just like Flash is must have later, actually. So Cyborg is gonna buff Flash and make him a decent budget damage dealer, but Flash, as soon as you have the proper teams to no longer use the Just League team because you're eventually gonna cycle them out of your top 6 fights, Flash becomes a very good support character that you can use with League of Anarchy, you can use with some King themes, you can use with a lot of things that benefit from fast tech hits because he gives one fast tech hit. We got Superman, somewhat useful, I guess, if you have him and you have the gears, but it's a miracle because you're gonna have to open a chest for him and a chest for his gears, and it's really not worth the investment. I still don't have this character. I don't have Just Like Superman, I don't have Enchantress, and I don't have Harley. Unless I randomly drop them from Swords or something, I'm never gonna have them. I mean, I do have Enchantress on the secondary account because I randomly dropped her from Swords, but those are legendary characters that are too hard to get for me to care to get them. Then we have Johnson Green Lantern. I would say he's a must-have later because of how much he buffs Batman the Drowned. And he kind of does the same thing as I said for Arkham Knight Batman, but here comes the thing I talked about earlier, where it matters a lot how much the character brings to the table compared to how hard they are to get. This man is not that hard to get. Arkham Knight Batman is not that hard to get because he has a lot of chests that he shares with our legendary characters, where he's got a 5% chance to get him or stuff like that. But nothing beats being able to buy somebody from the League store. Nightmare Batman somewhat useful, I guess, for CA defensive teams. Kinflan Stockman must have early. Must have this man as early as possible. This is the first damage that you're gonna have, and you must have him as early as possible from the League store. Then we have my boy Legendary Black Adam. I'm gonna put this man actually at must have early. Because what he does is, and he doesn't really need gears. He's gonna be a bit faster with his percentage shell damage if he has gears, but he kind of acts the same way as classic Wonder Woman does, where you can put him in any team. Absolutely any team that you have can have this man, because kind of any team, unless you have a setup that requires 3 characters specifically, but anybody benefits from having some percentage hull damage done at the start of the fight that doesn't waste any energy to use. You just do basic hits on the enemy, and when tagging him in and out, you also generate power by doing that. So he's great in that regard. He's the most unintrusive in terms of gameplay percentage hull damage here in the game, and I think you're gonna have a lot of fun and benefit out of him the earlier you get. Martian Matter is somewhat useful if you already have him. The only thing that he does that's useful is he increases the duration of negative effects. So for example, how I use him on the main account where I randomly got him, I think 3 years ago from a Labor Day chest. I put him with Mr. Freeze, with Puppet on Mr. Freeze, and Mr. Freeze is actually gonna have a bit more damage if there's a Martian Manhunter in there, because he's gonna increase the duration of negative effects, and those negative effects be lasting longer means that we can stack more damage against target on the enemy. We got Mr. Freeze here. I'm gonna put him at must-have later. He's a very strong damage dealer for both the pay-to-win side of things and the free-to-play side of things. By the way, they're not in any particular order that much. But yeah, he's extremely goddamn strong late game, but he requires a ton, an absolute metric ton of investment to get him to that point. It's gonna be very strong for you, but yeah, he's gonna take a lot to get there. Also, I think I'm overrating Manta a bit. I'm gonna put him with Blue Beetle here. I think this is a better spot for him. I love Manta so much, and I might be biased when it comes to him, but I don't think he's more relevant than Blue Beetle, if we're being fair here. Catwoman doesn't matter. Multiverse Armor Super, I guess it's good to have. Just good in Arena and can be a budget. Damage dealer in raids and soul raids, I guess. Black Adam, I don't care. Somebody in comments gonna be like, but Sigvald, he heals when you get power drained. He heals your multiverse teammates and our teammates when they get power drained, they regen heal. Yeah, I don't care about that. If I'm getting power drained, it's a problem in the first place. The fact that I'm gonna get healed while that happens doesn't really help because I need power to use specials. If anybody was gonna make that argument, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter for the Multiverse Batman, doesn't matter for the Multiverse Captain Cold. Multiverse Granary is somewhat useful because it gives you some dot on the third special. And the values on that are absolute garbage. If you remember when the Multiverse team versus Supergirl thing was a thing, where we had boss Supergirl that took more damage the more specials used against her, and Multiverse Armor Supergirl would get to the point where the specials that she was doing were doing 40 mil damage, and he was like doing 1 mil damage with the dot on the third special that he added. But that dot on the third special is very, very useful because it's a negative effect. And it's gonna jumpstart real fast your Multiverse Armor Supergirl with Puppet. So that's why I'm putting him at somewhat useful. Multiverse Supergirl is also somewhat useful because he can buff the crap out of the resistance of the Multiverse teammates. Because he makes it that they take 50% less damage when they're below 50% health. And that is an amazingly huge modifier. I can't stress enough how amazingly strong that is. Multiverse Flash is also good to have. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a character with 3 fast tech hits, so you can use him as a combo builder if you need to, and he's a very good support, a must-have support for Multiverse Armored Supergirl. Multiverse White Canary doesn't matter. Okay, let's put her here. Mythic Wonder Woman, I'm gonna put her up somewhat useful. She's decent in Arena and Champions Arena, especially Champions Arena, because she's got that buff where she gets more damage when she kills a target, and you can just steamroll real fast teams. She's somewhat useful if you want to grind Champions Arena real fast. She's gonna give you the fastest Champions Arena fights, I guess. Nightwing doesn't matter. Predator Batman is good to have. He fills a lot of roles. He can be a stun setup for the League of Anarchy team. He can be a disabled setup for Sir Banshee. He can even be a budget damager, but boy, who does that now? Nobody has the Predator Batman damage dealer and actually does damage with it. Okay, so Power Girl must have early. This is what gonna be Power Girl and where's Dr. Fate? I always like to put them together. Those guys are gonna be kind of the best support characters you're gonna have early game, and they're gonna be useful late game. Because a lot of the times I find myself sometimes not using Power Girl, always using at least Dr. Fate. At least Dr. Fate is always used. Sometimes I'm not using Power Girl, sometimes I'm using Power Girl, I'm using Dr. Fate, and I'm like, oh damn, I'm out of power reduction on my characters. I would have needed a third character like those guys. Those guys reduce the power bar cost by 2. And no matter where Ingestimable goes in terms of direction, there's gonna be no way that those guys don't benefit at least one team that's gonna be in the top 6 teams. There's just no way. They're such universal supports. Get them as soon as possible. And especially early on when you're missing a lot of support characters, having your power cost reduced for Deathstroke by 2 power bars, for King, and for a lot of other things, and a lot of other budget damage dealers you're gonna have, it's gonna be very useful. Or Supergirl doesn't matter. Swamp Thing doesn't matter. Raiden, somewhat useful, I guess, because he's good in Arena with the third special dealing a lot of damage to the other 2 teammates of the enemy that are tagged out, so I guess he's somewhat useful. Raven must have early. Raven is gonna make all your damage dealers be on steroids pretty much. You can get one of the earliest 2 billion damages is gonna most likely come from Raven plus King with Twin Blade. Or from League of Anarchy, depending how lucky you get from with EPI and her gears and maybe Harley or Joker. But she's gonna be extremely strong for you. Robin King is must have later. When this man released, and I think most of that feeling that I had was because he was bugged. He was not giving Batman drunk crit damage for the first month after release. But I didn't really have a good opinion on this man, because I was like, yeah, but my Batman the drunk can do 2 billion damage anyway. But now that he gives me crit damage, the thing is, he can do a lot earlier 2 billion damage, especially in soul rates where I'm missing a lot of passive stats. And secondly, she makes a lot of fights more convenient and finish faster, so I think he's a must-have, eventually. Though he's not the biggest thing you should rush for. We got my boy Red Hood, he's somewhat useful. He can extend the duration of the fights by 30 seconds. That's not that impactful because in the last 30 seconds, the power generation is not great, is as low as in the first minute of the fight. But he can be useful for something like Batman the Drowned that doesn't really care about power generation. Silver Aquaman doesn't matter. Yeah, he gives stun resistance based on how many might characters you have in your team. I know, but use that so not often that it really doesn't matter. The Revenge is good to have. She's especially strong with the... Actually, bro, I'm putting Batman in here, not putting Silver Banshee. Like, Silver Banshee with Puppet and Black Adam can do a lot of damage, and they're a very fun team to use. I'm gonna put her at must-have later. You can even have her early. You can even argue for this thing, because she's gonna be one of the earliest damage dealers that are most likely gonna stick around for a while that you're gonna have. Yeah, I'm gonna put her actually at must-have early, because she's very strong for what she... for how hard she is to get. I don't know about the gears though. Because she's got the challenge that used to come around so much more often, but now I think they monopolized it around Halloween or something like that. Because I haven't seen a Sir Banshee challenge in a while. I don't know. If you get her, if you can get her early without too much trouble, she's a must-have early. If you can't, you just get her later. Got some Black Canary here. I don't care. Sir Batman, bro, I don't care. He's just Predator Batman, but worse. Silver Catman, I don't care. Silver Cyborg, I don't care. Silver Deathstroke, I don't care. Speed Force is somewhat useful in very specific scenarios. He gives you some fast attack chance if you ever need that, but you don't have it on the build for some reason. You can add him in. Same with Silver Flash, I guess. Silver Green Arrow useless. Silver Grodd useless. Silver Green Lantern is a must-have later because you're gonna use him with the Manta team. Or let's put him at good to have, because it's no way that Manta is in the good to have tier, and we have his support character being a tier higher. I guess we can also put Brain. Again, the pay to win versus free to play side of things, because Brainiac is a must have for the pay to win side of things, but for the free to play side of things, it's good to have, but he's not gonna be that impactful. Okay, let's just leave him here. The new Shazam. Doesn't matter. I just refuse to put him into the somewhat useful tier. I hate this character. Silver Harley doesn't matter. Shazam somewhat useful. Is gonna be very strong in Arena and Champions Arena, and it's gonna buff your characters up for raids and swords a fair bit. Gonna give him 100% base damage for Might and Arcane, which doesn't matter that much. But if you don't have any other options, you might as well use the Shazam. Silver Robin and Blade Master Robin. I think I did put Blade Master Robin somewhere already. But yeah, they don't matter. But if we ever had a meta where we would have again characters that rely on combo being built and then them tagging in to do a fat special, it would actually be pretty good because he builds combo, but we don't really need that. Surrey Scarecrow doesn't matter, Solstice Electrify doesn't matter. The full Suicide Squad team doesn't matter. Because yeah, you can argue that they're strong in Arena and Champions Arena, but they're the hardest to put together out of everything I put here for the Arena and Champions Arena performance. So yeah, I just don't care about them. Silver Superman doesn't matter. Silver Swamp Thing doesn't matter. Starfire doesn't matter. Joker doesn't matter. The silver one. Sub-Zero doesn't matter. Silver Black Canary doesn't matter. Primal Something, I guess, is somewhat useful if you're using him in the Constantine team with Zatanna and Constantine, though that's not the best thing. But the shield that he gives is very strong. The heal that he gives is strong. The damage buff that he gives is useful. I'm very sad for Elder Swamp Thing because he's not the problem. Constantine is the problem. Zatanna's not the problem. Constantine is the biggest problem. He needs to be stronger. And if he was stronger, then Swamp Thing would also get the credit he deserves. Like, he does a fair bit to buff them. He's a very convenient and good character to use. I really like when I'm using Swamp Thing, but I don't have much to use him with because he only buffs Constantine, and Constantine is not that great. So I'm sorry, my boy Swamp Thing. Room doesn't matter. Telekinetic growth doesn't matter. Reverse Slash is good to have. Can be a combo builder for pretty much everything. Can help you out early game if you know how to play him with power generation, because he swaps your power bar with the enemy's power bar. And you have more power than the enemy, it's not going to be a good swap for you, but that is kind of your fault at that point. Then we have my boy Unbreakable Cyborg. It's going to be in the doesn't matter tier. And Hin Charlie doesn't matter. Vixen, good to have, I guess. Yet again, she gives you kind of the same thing that Shazam does, which is base attack based on the negative effects you have on the enemy, but she gives a fair bit more. She can also apply some negative effects, and she also boosts your class advantage. Then we have Warrior Queen Wonder Woman is going to be in the doesn't matter, and Zatanna is going to be in the must-have early because she gives you both a buff and percentage shell damage. So yeah, the goal of this tier list was to kind of put it together so you have the best teams and do the peak performance damage and soul rates by only having the things in the first two tiers. And I think this tier list kind of accomplishes that. You could argue that Manta might be needed for that or not, but if Mr. Freeze is there, you don't really need Manta. You could argue that Miss Vixen should be higher because if you have a peak performance Mr. Freeze, she might make it in that team because he doesn't need that much help. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how this looks. Again, you most likely are going to be able to have just the characters in the first two tiers and have the peak performance in rates and soul rates for both the free-to-play side of things and the pay-to-win side of things. With the pay-to-win side of things, you can have a bit more fun. You can drag out of the good-to-have tier some characters like Manta, Blue Beetle, pair them up with Raven, use Twin Blades. But King can do the same thing, Batman, Batman Catwoman can do the same thing. You're just using that because you like the character more, not because they are that necessary. But yeah, all that being said, this is kind of the tier. Hopefully this is useful to you guys, so you know what characters to be looking for, and you don't cry about not having the Suicide Squad team, because that's the most important thing. They should be the ones crying because they're that bad. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye!